Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Tonight on the show, we got the latest Steelers injury updates, 3 pretty big ones for you guys at the top of today's show. Then my film takeaways after a pretty brutal watch of the Steelers' Week 8 loss to the Green Bay Packers, offensive and defensive takeaways. And we'll finish up today's show with some of my suggestions for how to fix the Steelers' struggling defense moving forward. Now, make sure you guys give me a follow on X. I just passed 5,000 followers on X, so thank you guys so much for supporting me on that platform as well. But I put out film analysis on there. I put out a lot of my film study notes and stuff out on my X account, guys, before I do my takeaway video here on Steelers Talk every single week. So if you guys want that early access to my thoughts on what I'm seeing on the Steelers film every single week and some extra nuggets on there, you guys can follow me at Jack_Sperry, as well as all my instant reactions to every bit of Steelers breaking news action that happens throughout the week. I give my takes out there on X. If you want to give me a follow on X, I'd greatly appreciate it. We'll just jump right into our content here today, starting with the injury updates that we have for you today. Starting with defensive tackle Daniel Ekuale, who is out for the season now with a torn ACL. That's a pretty big blow for the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, specifically in run defense, specifically because you've got Jonathan Taylor, maybe the MVP of the league, coming into town next weekend. And Ekuale has been a really valuable rotational piece as a nose tackle, run-defending type of player for this defense that this team will now miss for the rest of the season. Prayers up for 96. But then Deshaun Elliott, it sounds like he has a pretty significant knee injury as well. His knee bent in a really awkward way, trying to tackle Tucker Kraft on the first drive of the third quarter for the Green Bay Packers, and that's looking like that's going to keep him out for a pretty extended period of time, if not the entire season, just like Ekuale's is. Still awaiting official word from him, but it's not looking terrific. Hopefully, it's better than what we're expecting at this point. And then Isaac Seumalo, the left guard, still left yesterday's game with a pec injury. It's a pec strain, according to head coach Mike Tomlin. And if that's a grade 1 strain, that usually takes about 2 to 4 weeks to heal up, and he should be able to return this season from that injury, which is good news. But also with this next, next 2-game stretch here, if you don't have Isaac Seumalo and you're forced to play Spencer Anderson at that left guard spot, that might limit a lot of what the Steelers can do offensively in terms of their jumbo personnel packages. And in terms of last night, we'll start our offensive film takeaways with Seumalo's injury, and you could tell that his absence was felt on this offense, okay? You had to put Spencer Anderson at left guard once Seumalo left, which means you couldn't do your jumbo personnel looks. And that certainly made an impact on the Steelers' run game, and that affected the way Arthur Smith called the football game, frankly. The Pittsburgh's offense just wasn't the same after Seumalo left the game. It just wasn't from a schematic standpoint, from a formation standpoint, from an execution standpoint. The second Isaac Seumalo left that game, it just became a lot worse for the Pittsburgh Steelers on offense. And, if Seumalo has to miss an extended period of time here, however long he has to miss, I wonder what Arthur Smith's plan is to adjust. And, will they go to more 11 personnel and put Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin III out there more often and do more spread concepts and allow Aaron Rodgers to use his mind to pick apart defenses instead of the kind of heavy personnel, under center kind of stuff they've been doing a lot while Seumalo has been healthy? Or if they just continue to try and run the heavy personnel stuff, but they have Darnell play Spence's role, and then they maybe have Jonnu Smith or Pat Freiermuth playing on the wing. But honestly, guys, I'm not sure if I trust Muth or Jonnu in that kind of role. I guess we'll just have to see what Art has in store for this offense in the weeks to come. But really, guys, when you watch the game back and you look at the game, on offense, the 3rd and longs and the 3rd and very longs were just a killer for this offense. Aaron Rodgers pointed this out in his postgame press conference last night. And on the Steelers' 11 drives on the evening, they had a whopping 9 3rd and longs. They were 2 for 9 in conversion rate there versus those 3rd and longs. And the only 2 conversions that they had came on defensive penalties that led to automatic first down. So the Steelers didn't earn a first down on a 3rd and long the entire game. And then on the 6 3rd and very longs that they had, and 6 is just way too much 3rd and very longs in a game, guys. Those are extremely low percentage conversion situations, and you had 6 of them. Last night, you went 0 for 6 in those situations, all right? So you just got to stay ahead of the sticks. This offense is really dependent on, moving the sticks, staying ahead of the sticks, playing efficiently, and the second you start having these holding penalties and these illegal motion penalties and these 15-yard personal fouls from DK Metcalf, putting you behind the sticks, and, you take 3 sacks yesterday as well, that puts you behind the sticks. It's really tough to get back ahead of those sticks, and especially against a good defense with a great pass rush like Green Bay's, it's really tough for Aaron Rodgers to execute in those kinds of situations. So those were a killer. But overall, guys, a positive from this game on the film was that the run game was absolutely rolling, all right? They had over 5 yards per carry in this football game with Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell, despite the fact that the Green Bay Packers came into the week as the second-ranked run defense in the National Football League. So this run offense for the Steelers has really had their way with the number 1 and number 2 rushing defenses in the league in the Cleveland Browns and the Green Bay Packers over the last month of football here. You didn't get to 100 yards rushing yesterday, but that was mostly because you only had 3 rush attempts in the second half. And, obviously, you were kind of behind the 8 ball. You were having penalties. You were losing later in the game, so you didn't really have a lot of opportunities to run the football. But, you probably could have ran it a little bit more than you ended up actually running it. And it kind of felt like after Isaac Seumalo went down with his injury that Arthur Smith got a little bit scared to run the football, because we saw what this rushing offense was like before they started using the jumbo personnel packages, and it wasn't pretty. All right, remember, those first 3 weeks of the year, the Steelers' rush offense was one of the worst in the league. And, the minute Seumalo comes out and you can't use those jumbo personnel packages anymore, maybe Arthur Smith was like, I'm going to lean a little bit more on Aaron Rodgers. But then the penalties started piling up and the run game disappeared, and it just led to a very poor offensive effort in the second half from the Pittsburgh Steelers. But another positive here is I thought Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin III both showed their value to this offense in this football game, all right? DK Metcalf added another touchdown to his total as well. And, you look at the wide receiver trio for the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, all of them had at least 4 catches, so pretty decent volume. And Roman Wilson actually was able to be the one that led the way in the receiving yards department. He also got his first touchdown of his young career. So, to see these 3 guys on film do some good things, all right? Calvin was getting open even more consistently than the 4 receptions that he had. He had a couple of really good routes where he just didn't get the football, unfortunately. And then Roman Wilson continues to show good things on film, have good hands, have good feet, get that second foot down on that deep ball from Rodgers early in the game. They have those hands to secure that touchdown grab in the end zone in the fourth quarter. These 3 wide receivers, I think, guys, are serviceable players, especially in an offense that likes to spread the ball around. All of them are team-centric guys. And I'm looking forward to seeing what this wide receiver trio can do as we continue on here in the 2025 campaign. But now shifting our focus to the tight end room here, and what exactly is Jonnu Smith's value to this offense, at least to the point where he's getting the number 1 most amount of snaps in this offense in this football game. I mean, he had almost 10 more snaps than Darnell Washington in this game, and he had 11 more snaps than Pat Freiermuth, who I would argue is this team's best receiving tight end on this team, frankly, by far. And, Jonnu is somebody that is obviously Arthur Smith's guy. He's a really good yak threat. I think he's maybe not quite as dynamic as he was last year, but hey, you get him the ball out in space, he can make a guy miss. He's got decent speed for his size. That's what he does. He's a yak threat, but he doesn't block, he doesn't run routes, and he doesn't catch the football at a high enough level to really be, I think, the number 1 receiving threat in this Steelers offense. All right, I think he has to have really a specialized role because he really isn't much of a blocker and really never really has been. He doesn't really run routes. He doesn't separate versus man coverage as well. Like, what he's good for is like little hitch routes, and he's, little, chips and releases, and, the screen looks that they give him. But outside of that, he doesn't really run routes. And then it's not like he's a ball hawk where he's going to be ripping it away from a DB in a contested catch situation. So, if he doesn't bring any of those 3 components to the table, I don't know why this Steelers offensive coaching staff insists on giving him the most snaps out of all the tight ends in this room. And Jonnu, I think, should be this team's number 3 tight end as that true yak threat. and be that true gadget weapon in the Steelers offense. And, I think Darnell Washington should get more snaps than him. I think Pat Freiermuth should consistently get more snaps than him. And then he can slot in there as that third tight end. And I know you're paying him a decent chunk of change and you want to make him worth that chunk of change. But at the end of the day, man, you got to use your personnel in smart ways. And, you got to put the cap to the side a little bit to make the team better and to make the team run efficiently. And, in these kind of situations where they're asking Jonnu Smith to go out and run a route versus man coverage, it is dead every single time. And it's essentially a dead player on the field that you can't throw to. So, I think they got to put Pat Freiermuth out there in those kinds of situations and in those kinds of concepts more often. And that's exactly our final takeaway here on the offensive side of the ball that I have for you guys, which is that Pat Freiermuth should play more. We saw that explosion that he had versus the Cincinnati Bengals 2 weeks ago on Thursday Night Football. And in terms of route running, in terms of route running intelligence versus zone, in terms of hand reliance, all that different stuff. Route running just in general. He is the best tight end in this group at all of that stuff. Now, is he perfect? No. He has some untimely drops at times, all right? He's not the fastest guy in the world. He's not the best blocker in the world, but he's a better blocker than Jonnu Smith is, and he's a more valuable receiving threat, especially when you actually ask him to run a route outside of like a hitch route or a screen or chip and release, which is kind of the skill set of Jonnu Smith. So if you're asking someone to run a seam, if you're asking somebody to run a corner, all right, if you're asking someone to run an actual football route, don't put Jonnu Smith out there. Put Pat Freiermuth out there. It's just going to make things a lot better for Aaron Rodgers and give him a legitimate target, especially when he faces man-to-man coverage. So next here on the show, I'm going to be breaking down my takeaways on the Steelers defense. And, man, it was an ugly performance. We're going to be breaking down everything that went wrong, and then we'll get into some potential solutions at the end of today's show. But first, let me tell you about our new sponsor here on Steelers Talk at GLD. All right, fellas, let's be real. Buying men's jewelry used to be an absolute nightmare. It was low-quality junk that snapped after a week, or it was insanely overpriced with ridiculous markups. That's why I rock with GLD. They've changed the game in men's jewelry. You're getting quality pieces that are built to last without breaking the bank. And unlike a lot of other companies, GLD only uses real gold. None of that cheap stuff. Every single stone is meticulously hand set. Plus, their proprietary production process makes sure you're getting the highest quality jewelry possible. You can literally see and feel the difference with GLD. And a big shout out to GLD for shipping me out here an awesome Steelers pennant. I actually wore it on the Steelers Talk watch party last week versus the Green Bay Packers on Sunday Night Football. I really love it, guys, and I think I'm going to be wearing it on every single watch party this year. And it's more than just Steelers, guys. You can get a bunch of different teams. You can get your college team as well. And, of course, you can get a Steelers pennant. They got multiple different options as well. So I really love the price point that GLD brings to the table as well as the quality. And you know that feeling when you get your new chain, it just hits different. It elevates your whole fit, the confidence, the compliments, the way you carry yourself all changes instantly. And GLD has everything from chains to pendants, rings, earrings, even fully iced out watches if that's your style. And listen, don't just take my word for it. Over 2 million customers and 50,000 five-star reviews backs it up. Not to mention, it's worn by some of the biggest names out there like Justin Bieber, Micah Parsons, Tyreek Hill, Malik Neighbors, A$AP Rocky, and a ton more. The best part, every single piece from GLD is guaranteed for life. It's literally built to last for the rest of your life, just like your love for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Work hard and change the game. For a limited time only, new customers are getting an insane deal here. Use code CHAT to get 50% off plus a free chain at GLD.com. That's 50% off and a free chain with code CHAT at GLD.com. After your purchase, they will ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you. A big shout out to GLD for sponsoring today's edition of Steelers Talk. My first takeaway from the film from this Week 8 loss versus the Packers on the defensive side of the ball, guys, is that the first half does inspire some hope, all right? And I understand that a lot of this coming up here is going to be negative, and rightfully so, especially what happened in the second half of this ball game. But in that first half, all right, you did force three and outs in that half, and you only gave up 7 points. Now, I know there was 2 missed field goals, but one of them was a very long field goal And, I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers defense as a whole, they kept, the ball in front of them. They tackled relatively well in that first half. They had a couple missed tackles, but it was a lot better than what we ended up seeing in the second half. I thought they put more pressure on Jordan Love in the first half as well. And just like in the Cincinnati game where you come in and you start playing pretty darn well and you come ready to play, as the game goes on, it seems like this defense got a little bit more timid. Of course, you dealt with the Deshaun Elliott injury in the second half, and you could certainly tell that Deshaun was missed in the second half. Now, that's not to say Elliott was perfect, all right? He made some bad plays in that first half, and he, of course, allowed that catch to Tucker Kraft. I mean, you could argue that should have been OPI, and that was a shove on Kraft's part that wasn't called by the referees. But nonetheless, he did allow that catch. And, before Elliott's injury, Pittsburgh Steelers only gave up 7 points at that point. And then once he left, the Pittsburgh Steelers gave up 28 points for the rest of the game. And, we saw it when he went down with his injury in week 1. That defense played a lot worse when he left, and then they played pretty bad over the next couple of weeks while he was out of the lineup. And really the only thing that saved them in week 3 versus New England was all the turnovers that they forced. So, Deshaun Elliott, I keep telling you guys, is such an important piece to this defense because they move him all around. They put him in the box. They put him sometimes in the slot. They do play him at different types of alignments from the safety position as their box safety. He is kind of their Swiss Army knife in this defense. And, when you take him out of the game plan, it really limits the menu that Terrell Austin has at his disposal. But to be clear here, guys, that's not an excuse for the way the Pittsburgh Steelers at defense as a whole played after that injury. It should be, okay, next man up, next guy's ready to go, and that was very clearly not the case as the second half unfolded in last night's ball game. And, we'll start here with Chuck Clark, the other starting safety in last night's game. And I can't tell you why, once again, Chuck Clark was starting. He did not have a good game versus the Cincinnati Bengals. And that was coming off a healthy scratch game, or he didn't even have a helmet versus the Cleveland Browns. So I don't know what happened between that Browns game to now where, Chuck Clark has all of a sudden earned the trust of the Pittsburgh Steelers coaching staff, where he has earned the most snaps by far out of any safety on the Steelers team. Now, obviously, Deshaun Elliott was a full-time starter up into his injury, right? But Chuck Clark was starting and getting those starting reps the entire game. And then Juan Thornhill came in, got 26 snaps, and Jabril Peppers ended up getting 13 by the end of the night. And frankly, I think all these guys had a bad game. I really do think that. All right, even Deshaun, he took a really bad angle on that first touchdown to Tucker Kraft. For some reason, the defense aligned him on the other side of the field, but had him in man coverage on a receiver on the other side of the formation, and took a terrible pursuit angle. And, Elliott certainly made his lapses in coverage in yesterday's game as well, but so did Chuck Clark, who looked abundantly slow. Juan Thornhill, who was over-aggressive at times, had tough time tackling at times. And then Jabril Peppers even looked lost in coverage at times as well, especially versus play action. And, in my opinion, guys, there's just no reason for Chuck Clark to start for this defense, especially when, there's enough healthy players that I think are better than him that are ready to go. In my opinion, Juan Thornhill should probably be the free safety, even though he's got his flaws, certainly. He's not the best free safety in the world, but at least he's got a little bit of speed with him. At least he's aggressive. At least he's willing to, cut, these certain kinds of routes that they need to cut, these crossing routes and stuff like that. Chuck Clark is too slow and too timid to be able to do that on a consistent basis from the post safety position. And then you got Jabril Peppers, who should be your strong safety, somebody that can do, kind of those hybrid duties that they ask Deshaun Elliott to do, be a run blocker, or run defender, I should say, be a blitzer, be somebody that can be out there in pass coverage and be a good communicator. Peppers can do all those things, and he's done that at a high level all throughout his career, especially in his time in New England. Okay, so I think moving forward, Chuck Clark should be benched. You got to have Thornhill out there, as imperfect as he is, and then you got to have Jabril Peppers in there at strong safety. And maybe you want to tinker with some things. Maybe put Jalen Ramsey at free safety and have Jabril Peppers at strong safety, and you try and figure something out in the cornerback spot. That's something that I would be open to. But certainly, in my opinion, Chuck Clark should not be out there as a starting free safety for this team. But then also, guys, not only were the safeties bad, but in my opinion, the linebacker play on the whole was bad in this football game. Patrick Queen, Cole Holcomb in particular were out of position multiple times. You could tell that the play action game really kind of messed with their minds a little bit at times. Now, there was a bright spot in the linebacker room in this game, and it was Payton Wilson, who I thought was consistently very good against both the pass game and the run game in this football game. All right, he was consistently in the right run fit. He was doing a good job knowing when to take risks in run game and shoot gaps. He was really good, in my opinion, in pass coverage as well. He didn't allow any big gains. He didn't get completely fooled the way that Patrick Queen and Cole Holcomb certainly did at times in this ball game. I thought Payton Wilson was a shining star in that linebacker room that really had a tough day. But on the whole, man, that middle of the Steelers defense, especially in pass coverage, was a mess all night long outside of Wilson, in my opinion. But then, in my opinion, guys, this might be a little bit controversial, but I don't think that the cornerbacks were necessarily at fault in this football game. Per my charting, guys, all right, when you look at all the different passing snaps that the Green Bay Packers had on offense yesterday, and you attribute who's to blame for, who allowed what catches and all that different stuff. There was only one example in my charting of a cornerback coverage error that led to a catch, and it was on Joey Porter Jr., where he was supposed to cover a flat on a fourth down, and then he didn't cover his guy out in man coverage on the outside, and it led to an easy first down. But outside of that, man, Jalen Ramsey, Darius Slay, and Joey Porter Jr., at least in coverage, looked pretty good. Now, Joey Porter Jr. had a missed tackle or two. Darius Slay had a missed tackle early in the game. It certainly wasn't a perfect performance, and there were certainly plays that Jordan Love did not throw it to their receivers where they did not cover their guys particularly well, and I'm particularly looking at Darius Slay in that regard. But I thought somebody that was really consistent all throughout the night was Joey Porter Jr., and I think that JPJ has actually done a very good job in man coverage these last 2 weeks. Now, of course, he was penalized in Cincinnati, but for me, guys, a couple of those penalties were a bit ticky-tack. The refs were kind of playing to the home crowd, as things tend to go in the National Football League. But in this game, at home, Joey Porter Jr., didn't get those penalties, and I thought he played actually very clean in this ball game. He was very sticky in man coverage. He was hitting his jabs in those jam coverages, and he was looking really good out there, man, in those man coverage looks pretty consistently, and Jordan Love really avoided him versus man coverage all night long. So that is really a testament to him. And I think that Joey Porter Jr. is certainly a bright spot in the Steelers defense at this point in time. But then another bright spot in the Steelers defense that unfortunately is not getting enough time on the field right now is Nick Herbig, who has been one of the most productive pass rushers in all of football this year. And despite all the outrage that Nick Herbig got less than 30 snaps versus the Cincinnati Bengals, he only got 29 snaps on Thursday Night Football a couple weeks ago. He got even fewer snaps in this football game versus the Green Bay Packers. He only had 24 snaps in this ball game. All right, that is, to me, unacceptable. They're still treating him like he is like this rookie rotational pass rusher that comes in whenever TJ Watt is completely gassed and he is a true third piece. No, Nick Herbig is a bona fide starting piece in this league, and he's honestly one of the best pure pass rushers in the National Football League. All right, and you want to know why this defense is taking a big step back? You want to understand why your quick pressure rate is going down dramatically these last 2 weeks? It's because Nick Herbig's not starting for your defense anymore. It's not that hard to figure out. Meanwhile, TJ Watt, the guy that you're paying over $40 million per season to, played 93% of the snaps and was absolutely gassed by the end of this game. By the end of this game, they were putting tight ends on TJ Watt, and they were doing a serviceable job on him. For a guy that's making $41 million per season, that should never, ever, ever be the case. All right? Ever. And the fact that TJ was so goddamn tired, I mean, again, he's on the other side of 30 now. It's just too much, okay? Especially when Green Bay's dominating the time of possession in the second half of the game. And, your offense can't stay on the field, and the defense is always out there. You got to mix things up, and you got to keep these guys fresh throughout the course of the game if you want these guys to be effective in the fourth quarter. The Steelers didn't do that, and they're leaving maybe their most effective pass rusher on this team on the bench for a large majority of the defensive snaps. That's coaching malpractice practice at its very finest. Then the final defensive film takeaway I have for you guys is that's the same old plan from Teryl Austin and Mike Tomlin. You guys remember all the different solutions and all the different suggestions that I gave on our videos last week on how the Steelers defense can play better. Well, guess what? Teryl Austin completely shat on that and said, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I'm going to hope for a different result. And they played man-free coverage. You guys remember this coverage if you watched our video that came out on Sunday morning about how they run this coverage more than any other coverage in their defensive playbook. And guess what? They played it at an even higher percentage. They doubled down on this coverage that has been failing all season long, and they played it 14 times versus the Green Bay Packers on 37 defensive passing snaps. And, when it comes to blitzing, Green Bay knew exactly what the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to do because on over 80% of the times that the Steelers blitzed in this game, they were running these cover one man-free looks, which is a 5 or 6 man, pressure look, depending on how many people are in protection. And then you got island one-on-one coverage across the board with a deep post safety. All right, and when you got, coverage players, the linebacker and at safety and at cornerback that can't cover people for a long period of time, guess what? Jordan Love's going to have opportunities to throw the ball down the field and throw the ball down the field extremely quickly. And the book is out on the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, guys, and how to beat it. And every single team that we have played this year outside of the New York Jets has implemented this. And even the Jets, and with their own game plan, had a lot of success versus this Steelers defense. All right, and the plan that these teams are consistently coming out in is you get the ball out fast to negate the Steelers pass rush, you throw the ball underneath when they play zone coverage, and then you wait for downfield chances versus those man blitz looks with your favorite matchup between receiver versus cornerback or safety or linebacker, whatever your favorite matchup is, you target that guy in man coverage. And you guys can take a look at the splits here from Jordan Love last night versus man blitz looks. All right, so 14 of those were man free looks, and then they had one cover zero look. It was 12 for 15 for an 80% completion percentage, 181 yards for an average of 12 yards per attempt. And he had 3 touchdowns, and then his completion percentage was still high versus zone coverage versus the other looks and any other coverage that the Steelers did throw out there. But he was mostly just checking it down, and as you guys can see, the Steelers are actually bottling it up pretty well. It's just 6.7 yards per attempt, and he didn't have any touchdowns versus any other type of coverage. All 3 touchdowns for Green Bay last night came versus a man blitz look that the Steelers could not hold up on the back end. And, right now, the way that I would consider, how I view the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, guys, is that it's aggressive and conservative in the worst possible ways, given the personnel that they have on this team right now. Right now, what Teryl Austin and Mike Tomlin's plan is to be aggressive with their pass rush and to blitz a lot, but to be conservative in their pass coverage and try to keep, the lid on the defense. And what you do when you do those two things is that you have a vast array of space in the underneath and intermediate levels of the field because you're trying to defend the deep ball, you're trying to play conservatively, but then you're trying to attack the quarterback by sending extra rushers. But you're leaving a ton of space wide open in the short and intermediate levels of the field, and it's allowing these quarterbacks to get the ball out lightning fast. Or we could just take a look at the average time to throws of these quarterbacks that are playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. And you guys can see that these quarterbacks have a plan to get this ball out extremely quickly. Jordan Love yesterday at 2.64 average time to throw. By the way, guys, the second highest or the second lowest average time to throw this year is Tua Tagovailoa at 2.64. So the fact that these numbers are consistently ranking where it would be towards the top of average time to throw, it's just obscene, man. The average, even with Justin Fields' 3.53 number in week 1, the average is still only 2.74 seconds before the quarterback is letting go of the football, which is absolutely unacceptable. And it's telling you that the Pittsburgh Steelers are allowing these underneath and intermediate chunks from these offenses very, very consistently. And it's just a very squishy, very bland, very bad defensive scheme from Teryl Austin, plain and simply. And here's the thing, guys. When you blitz, and this is what the Steelers do, they blitz with 5 people a lot, okay? If you can't take away the first read on a blitz, you are screwed. The reason for that, especially when you don't have guys that can cover in the secondary, because you're going to lose quickly in those one-on-one matchups, and then also the underneath and intermediate zones are going to be wide-ass open. And then if those guys get open, like most of these receivers have, you get them the ball out there in space, and guess what? They got a lot of running room back there with not a lot of people out there in coverage because they're all blitzing. They're all behind the football, all right? So the way that you beat the blitz in the National Football League, or really any level of football, is you get the ball out quickly and you get these rushers trying to get to the quarterback behind the football. And that's exactly what these teams have been able to do against Tara Lawson and Mike Tomlin. They've just been sitting on their thumbs this entire season, not adjusting to what defenses are showing them or what these offenses are attacking them with this season. And my advice to Tara Lawson and to Mike Tomlin is to flip it around. Be more quote-unquote conservative in pass rush and not blitz as often, but then be more aggressive in pass coverage and take away the underneath routes that these teams are trying to beat you with. All right, like this pass rush is the most expensive in football. You've got a pass rusher in T.J. Watt that is making over $40 million per season. Alex Highsmith is making about as much as any number 2 edge rusher in the league. You got Cam Hayward, who's making a very good amount of money as well. All right, this pass rush, and then that's not even including kind of the more team-friendly contracts that you have on this team that are also very good, like Nick Herbig and Derek Harmon and Keanu Benson, who are still on their rookie deals. Those guys can impact the quarterback as well. So this team has the talent up front to be able to win with 4. All right, at least they should if they're worth their money. So, this is exactly why you pay for those guys, so that you can have this advantage. I can't tell you guys how big of an advantage it is to be able to get to the quarterback with just 4 rushers, okay? Because it allows you the luxury of having more pass defenders out there in coverage. And, this is why you pay for T.J. Watt. This is why you pay for Alex Highsmith. All right, what do bad teams in the National Football League with not a lot of talent on the defensive line do? They blitz. Why? Because they can't win one-on-one matchups. The Pittsburgh Steelers have the talent to win their one-on-one matchups and get home with 4, yet they are still one of the more blitz-heavy teams in the National Football League, and it's absolutely killing this defense. And for me, guys, I would, take more risks to take away the underneath and the intermediate levels of the field. And if that means teams begin taking a couple more deep shots on the Steelers per game, I'm actually okay with that. All right. I think, those are, a lot more sustainable there, where you can make some nice plays with Joey Porter Jr. with his long arms, Jalen Ramsey with his competitiveness, Juan Thornhill with his ability to, play center field. Like, I would rather take my chances with a deep ball, which is a lower percentage throw down the field, than just allowing these teams to just throw underneath into the intermediate levels of the field completely, unchallenged. That just doesn't make any sense to me, especially if you're going to be sending extra people on the blitz. It just doesn't make any sense from a defensive philosophy standpoint, where you're playing both aggressively and conservatively at the same time. And especially if you don't have the coverage players on the back end, it doesn't make any sense to play defense the way that the Pittsburgh Steelers are currently playing it. Now, listen, man, credit where credit's due. Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers executed at a high level. I think Jordan made some really good plays last night, and he was really accurate, and he was really good getting the ball out quickly, which is something that he has struggled with at times in his career. His accuracy was pinpoint for most of the night as well, made good decisions with the ball generally, and they avoided penalties. They did not have a lot of holding calls. They were not behind the sticks a whole lot. They took a profit, and it wasn't like the Packers were like bombing the ball down the field against the Steelers all day long. It was a lot of short passes that led to a lot of yak and led to a lot of yards after the catch opportunities, and the Steelers couldn't tackle, and they weren't in positions to make plays on those short and intermediate passes that Love was peppering throughout the evening. But make no mistake, guys, just because Jordan Love and the Packers executed at a high level doesn't mean Pittsburgh doesn't have some major changes that they need to undergo here if they're going to turn around this Steelers defense in the second half of the season. Now, the good news is it sounds like head coach Mike Tomlin at least sounds open to making changes. All right, at least, last night he was talking about how changes need to be made and all this different stuff. Here's exactly what Coach T said, and, this is what you want to hear from the head coach of a team whose defense is not playing well. We all have to own it. Certainly you start with the schematics because that's the leadership component of it, and certainly we're going to be looking at everything that we're doing because some of these problems are somewhat repetitive, and we're not getting better fast enough. We just got to be better in all areas. And it starts first with the positions that we put players in. So as coach and as players, it's all of us. We own it. We'll be better. We have to be. I'm open to doing whatever it is that we need to do schematically or from a personnel standpoint to improve this, certainly. So make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon here. We're going to be talking about some solutions as to what Mike Tomlin and Tara Lawson can do this week to make the Steelers defense better. Make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon if you haven't already, if you want this Steelers defense to play better in the second half of the season. And now we'll rattle these off here, guys, because this is already getting to be a pretty long video here. But first up here, change the play caller. That's one thing that they could do, whether that's Mike Tomlin taking over play calling duties, which he hasn't had in a very long time, or whether he gives it to Carl Dunbar or Alexander or whoever else he wants to give it to. If he doesn't think Tara Lawson's doing a good enough job sequencing these defensive play calls, then you can change the play caller. But I highly doubt that's going to happen at this point. But like we talked about earlier in the show, guys, you can blitz less overall. You're paying this defensive line as much money as they're making for a reason, all right? That doesn't mean you never blitz. That doesn't mean you don't keep teams on their toes, but it does mean that if you're the weakness of your team is in pass coverage, you should probably put more body resources into that pass coverage, so hopefully they can give your pass rush a little bit more time to get to the quarterback and earn their money. But then also, just specifically here, the type of blitz that you're running, almost 80% of the time right now, man-free, stop using it. Stop using it, especially if you're going to be playing man-free from off coverage, okay? Because that's just going to open up way too many underneath opportunities for opposing wide receivers to get open immediately, and it's just not a good way to play defense, period. But then also, I would say focus on taking away the underneath routes, whether that's buzzing both safeties down to take away the hooks while also playing man coverage, leaving the deep portion of the field unmanned by a deep safety. I'd be willing to do that and throw that in there a couple times a game just to focus on not giving up these easy completions. Press more often. If you have to put Corey Trice Jr. in the game to play more press on both sides of the field, do it, okay? You just can't give up these underneath and these quick passes time and time and time again, week after week after week, because it's not allowing your pass rush to get home, and that needs to be the bread and butter of this Steelers defense. Another thing that I would do for sure is sit Chuck Clark. Now, I'm open to how you want to configure the safety room. If you want to put Jalen Ramsey at safety full-time and kind of go the full Woodson route there, I'm open to that. If you want to put Thornhill at free safety and Jabril Peppers at strong safety, I'm open to that. All I know is Chuck Clark should be sat down and maybe even cut at this point in time. And then what I would do is definitely put Jabril Peppers at strong safety. He's played a Deshaun Elliott-like role with the New England Patriots, and he's played it at a very high level. Now, he's a little bit older, all these different things, but still a good tackler, still a really great teammate, good communicator, smart player. I think that he's more than capable of playing that role, and he should play that role moving forward. Also, get an equal rotation at outside linebacker. Nick Herbig has earned equal time on the field with TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. I don't care if he's making way less money. He's just as good as those guys on the field, and that's what matters, all right? Keep Alex and TJ fresh throughout the season and throughout the course of the game, and you get Nick Herbig on the field more often. Everybody wins. Then the final suggestion there is maybe you think about playing Corey Trice Jr. at CB2. It looks like he's finally getting back healthy. He's got those long arms. He was a press specialist at Purdue, and if you can combine his skill set with Joey Porter Jr., who's already a press man corner, you can really utilize Corey Trice Jr. in that way, and that would certainly help you focus on the underneath routes and start taking those away a little bit better, right? So there's certainly some options that you can take advantage of here if you are the Pittsburgh Steelers, and some things that you can consider. But what say you guys? Is Pittsburgh's defensive issues still fixable, or is this team just completely screwed for the rest of the season? Give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts on the Steelers defense down there in the comment section. And that'll be it for today's edition of Steelers News and Rumors. Marquez Valdes-Scantling is in Pittsburgh today for his workout and visit to the Steelers facility. If he ends up signing a contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers over the next 24 hours, we'll have a breaking news video for you guys here on Steelers Talks. Make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Till next time, guys, here we go, Steelers.